Good evening, thanks for joining us. This is NTD Business, and I'm Paul Graney. President Biden gets his pick to lead the SEC. Will Gary Gensler force companies to disclose their social, environmental, and governance activities? The largest U.S. crypto exchange goes public. Its initial market cap at nearly $100 billion. And fake vaccine cards are on the rise, even selling on the dark web. What's the risk to you, and what can be done? That and much more coming up on NTD Business. Hold on to your purse strings. Just yesterday we reported that prices are up at the till. Well, now they're also up at the port. Americans paid a lot more for imported goods in March, further fueling fears that inflation is heating up. The Labor Department says import prices rose for the fifth straight month, up 1.2% in March alone. On a year-on-year basis, they're up almost 7%. That's the fastest pace since 2012. Imported fuel prices rose 6.3% last month. Food prices also up 2%. Export prices rose more than 2% as well, mostly from higher prices for agricultural products, industrial supplies, materials. They call inflation the invisible tax, and it seems it's a lot harder to evade than the regular visible tax. In fact, tax evasion could be costing the government as much as $1 trillion in unpaid taxes every year. Now, the IRS commissioner wants more money from Congress to fight it. NTD's Evelyn Lee reports.
IRS Commissioner Charles Reddick says the U.S. government is losing around $1 trillion a year in unpaid taxes. Reddick told the Senate Finance Committee Tuesday the so-called tax gap, the difference between taxes owed and revenue collected, has grown substantially since the last official estimate of around $440 billion a year. He says new sources of wealth like cryptocurrencies are escaping taxation. So are foreign-sourced income and business income passed through as personal income.
If you add those in, I think it would not be outlandish to believe that the actual tax gap could approach and possibly exceed $1 trillion per year.
Reddick called for more funding for the IRS to go after tax evasion.
The IRS absolutely needs more resources across all lanes of the Internal Revenue Service. And, we do get outgunned.
President Biden's new tax plan calls for tougher enforcement on tax avoidance. In his first budget proposal for the new fiscal year, Biden asked for another $900 million for the IRS to fight tax dodging. The tax gap reflects a combination of underreported income, underpayment of taxes owed, and overclaiming of tax breaks. Evelyn Lee, NTD News.
And President Biden's pick to lead the Securities and Exchange Commission, Gary Gensler, is confirmed. Some are calling him the new sheriff of Wall Street. One of the big questions is, will Sheriff Gensler force companies to disclose their environmental, social, and corporate governance activities, or ESG activities? ESG is a broad but rather vague area that covers things like staff gender quotas, environmental concerns like CO2 emissions, or even things like slave labor in supply chains, think cotton labor in Western China. Many public companies already showcase their ESG goals, and that can help their brands, but it can also leave the brand open to criticism. Tim Shaler is an ESG investor in California and a former portfolio manager at PIMCO. Asked him where we've seen success with ESG in the past.
Well, the most successful ones that I've seen, that all of mankind has seen, is when Bishop Tutu, an Anglican bishop of South Africa, asked investors in the Western world to pressure companies to divest of their South African subsidiaries. That eventually helped contribute to the downfall of apartheid. But more recently, companies like Nucor, the largest U.S. steel company in the U.S., has been helped by its faith-based investors understand how they can avoid buying slave-tainted materials in Brazil that lead to production of steel in the U.S. And so now Nucor is not buying slave-tainted pig iron, a raw material for steel. So there have been literally hundreds of success stories of ESG investors bringing positive change to companies. Generally speaking, company management teams want to do the right thing, and they just need tools and information. And investors whose heart are in the right place can often bring positive ideas to those management teams how they can improve their supply chains or other things that need improvement.
And does it change the makeup of the economy, the structure of the economy, whereby we move a little bit further away from this economics, means everything, and the dollar is the be-all and end-all, towards more of a kind of conscious thing? Does it move away from the free market in a certain sense, or not necessarily?
No, in my opinion, this is the free market. So investors exercising their social conscience and asking management teams to manage the companies that the shareholders own. I think people often forget who owns these companies. It is not the management teams, it's the shareholders. When shareholders have a legitimate voice and a legitimate suggestion, it needs to be heard. If I owned a McDonald's franchise with 7 other investors and the manager said, well, you guys are just all minority shareholders, so you don't get a say in how I manage this restaurant, we would all fire it. Publicly listed companies should be managed the same way, in my opinion. It does not detract from the idea that the highest and best social good of a company is creating wealth that can be used in other things like healthcare and education and longevity and other social goods. And ESG investors have a role to play in that.
Very good. Tim Shaler, thank you.
Thank you.
But not everyone is so positive on the prospect of more transparent ESG. Fergus Hodgson is the Director of Economic Intelligence firm Econ Americas and has been following ESG developments for quite a while. He agrees forcing companies to disclose their activities will open them up to social pressure to act in a certain way, but says some might use this for political advantage. I asked him to explain.
Firstly, there's no real agreement on what ESG means, right? It stands for environmental social governance, but it's very opaque. And my honest view is that it's a wedge to get in a progressive social and political agenda to make companies comply with this agenda in almost like an extra regulatory manner. So it's a backdoor way of getting companies to comply with a certain ideological agenda under the banner of ESG. It's a very old, the term ESG is a relatively new one, but the idea goes back a long way, and it's a more collectivist understanding of what businesses should do or be, away from simply being private operations that serve their owners.
Can you think of any specific examples we're seeing at the moment where this is being utilized in the way that you say?
Of course, yeah. So already we see the gender and racial quotas, the affirmative action being brought in under this social element of ESG, the emphasis on certain greenhouse gas emissions or environmentalist, not activism, but environmentalist priorities under the environmental element. So there is an agenda there. It's just, but the inference is that all companies should comply with this. ESG basically is a way to say that this is almost like a universal standard or a universal way of doing things, and if you don't comply, you're an unethical businessman.
And you mentioned it's kind of extra regulatory. How did these extra regulations get enforced, in your opinion?
What I mean is that this doesn't have to be directly mandated. And in fact, directly mandated in ESG would be difficult because it is so opaque, and still there are accounting boards coming up with some way to apply this, right, to make it uniform across different industries. So rather than clear mandates, what we're seeing is just reporting. And so companies will then comply with or go along with whatever reporting requirements they see. Now, so how do we get people to comply with this? Like I said, it is peer pressure, and there are many levers. So for example, pension funds, which tend to be associated with government employees, will often have mandates to work with ESG certified investments. Do you follow what I mean? So some funds will be more available to firms and institutional investors that are ESG compliant, let's say. Further, not only is it just these pension funds, but companies that comply with ESG are much more likely to get government contracts. This is just a fact of life. So we see this gradual push And many firms just realize this pressure towards this ideological agenda is getting stronger, and eventually it will lead to there will be some mandates.
Very interesting. Fergus Hodgson, Econ Americas, thank you so much.
Thank you, Paul.
And if you're trying to travel and stay active during the pandemic, you've likely had to show you're negative for COVID-19 at some point. Show a doctor's certificate maybe. Well, now some people are trying to cheat the system by showing a fake certificate. NTD's Colin Fredrickson reports.
Fake COVID-19 health certificates are vexing businesses and institutions. People who aren't tested or vaccinated still want to do things in society. The thing is, certificates are so easy to make.
I mean, candidly, I think my children could do it if they needed to. Unfortunately, the U.S. government hasn't, effectively set a standard.
Fake certificates have appeared even on the dark web, selling for hundreds of dollars.
So we have a huge team that spends all their time on the dark web, for example, looking for advertisements for fake COVID tests, fake vaccine cards.
Checkpoint Technologies says many bad agents on the dark web aren't that interested in selling fake certificates. What they truly care about? Identity theft.
While you may think you're doing yourself a favor by giving up, let's say, your name, your phone number, whatever credentials that you're giving to get a negative test so you can travel, for example, what you're effectively doing is selling your identity.
Airlines in particular are vexed. The CDC says around 120 countries demand test results for entry, and many travelers are forging certificates to get in. A possible solution?
Vaccine card passports, if you will. It's not so much in the United States yet, but it's definitely something, a buzz in the industry.
Airlines don't want to verify certificates at the airport, saying it'll take too much time.
There is no central item or government governing this, right? So it's really a federal or probably a federal mandate or even an international mandate that has to come downward.
The FBI says do not buy fake vaccine cards. Do not make your own vaccine cards, and do not fill in blank vaccination record cards with false information. It adds that the unauthorized use of an official government agency's seal is a crime and can be punishable by up to 5 years in prison. Colin Fredrickson, NTD News.
Wall Street indexes closed pretty mixed today, despite big banks' stellar results. First day of earnings season, more on earnings in just a moment. The Dow rose 54 points, 0.16%, but the S&P 500 lost 17 points, 0.41%. The Nasdaq also dropping 138 points, about 1%. The Nasdaq was weighed down by tech stocks today. Apple, Microsoft, Tesla all falling. Crypto exchange Coinbase, though, jumped on its debut, fell back a little bit later. More details on that soon. Energy stocks were also strong. International Energy Agency raising its forecast for oil demand, while U.S. data showed that oil inventories fell sharply last week. All good for the oil prices. They rose, both WTI and Brent gaining about 4% today. Gold, though, slipping. Like I mentioned, the largest cryptocurrency exchange in America is now trading on the Nasdaq. Its initial valuation puts it on par with some of the biggest companies in the world. NTD's Phil Zoe reports.
The largest U.S. cryptocurrency exchange, Coinbase, debuted Wednesday at $381 a share on Nasdaq, valuing the company at $100 billion. That implies Coinbase is worth more than giants like CVS and Zoom, and puts it on par with the New York Stock Exchange as one of the biggest exchanges in the world.
Coinbase's fortunes will definitely depend on Bitcoin's fortunes, and Bitcoin is a speculative asset that goes up and down like a yo-yo.
Gerard says early Coinbase investors have been waiting to cash in, and now they're selling at the top of the market.
They need interested buyers. So they've got that. So numbers look good, and this is the time to strike.
But some say buyers are not phased. This is a safer way to invest in crypto.
Because one doesn't have to bet on the direction of crypto or really understand crypto to know that there's a lot of activity and you're buying the broker of a lot of this activity.
As long as there are legitimate ways to remove your money from the cryptocurrency world into the realer, I wouldn't say real, but realer world, I think you're in good shape.
Experts say being regulated is better than not being regulated. This is only the beginning.
Regulation, inspection and transparency, much more than we've had, is a good idea because the Bitcoin market's really, really badly manipulated and regulators are only just looking at it.
People are looking at other ways to invest in this new area.
I'm sure that others will follow this path, and then the exchanges themselves will compete with each other as businesses.
Phil Zhou, NTD News.
Coinbase shares rose to almost $430 today, but closed at $328. That brings its current market cap down to around $86 billion. Still pretty good. And big banks JP Morgan Chase, Goldman Sachs, Wells Fargo all reporting big increases in quarterly earnings. Releasing reserves set aside to cover pandemic-driven loan defaults helped. Wasn't as bad as they feared. Fred Kadamai reports.
Blowout earnings from three of the top U.S. banks. JP Morgan Chase's quarterly net income nearly quintupled to $14.3 billion. Goldman Sachs jumped sixfold, and Wells Fargo's profit catapulted sevenfold. Setting aside less money to cover sour loans as the economy rebounded from the pandemic helped beef up the bottom line at the three banks. O'Neill Global Advisors Chief Investment Officer Randy Watts.
Banks took a lot of loan loss reserves last year around this time. Loan quality's actually been better than they expected. So some of those loan loss reserves are going to get reversed and flow back into the income statement.
Big jumps in investment banking and trading revenue also boosted profit at JP Morgan and Goldman. A surge in initial public offerings featuring private firms merging with listed shell companies kept investment bankers busy. And the retail trading frenzy centered on so-called meme stocks like GameStop helped drive trading revenue up 57% at Goldman and 37% at JP Morgan. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon voiced optimism, saying, "We believe the economy has a potential to have extremely robust multi-year growth." His bank is seen as a barometer of the health of the U.S. economy.
And Apple's first product launch of the year is scheduled for April 20th. The company says the virtual event's tagline is spring loaded. Apple's expected to unveil updated iPad Pros and AirPods. The MacBook Pro and Air are also due for revamps, but those might come later. Bernie Madoff, who was convicted for running the largest known Ponzi scheme in history, died today in federal prison. He was serving a 150-year sentence. Zachary Goldman reports.
Bernie Madoff, convicted of running the largest known Ponzi scheme in history, died Wednesday in federal prison where he was serving a 150-year sentence.
Mr. Madoff, when are you going to say something to the victims?
He'd been incarcerated in Butner, North Carolina after he was sentenced in 2009 for engineering a fraud estimated as high as $64.8 billion. He was 82 years old. Madoff's thousands of victims included individuals big and small, charities, pension funds, and hedge funds. Among those betrayed were actors Kevin Bacon, Kira Sedgwick, and John Malkovich, Baseball Hall of Fame pitcher Sandy Koufax, and a charity associated with Hollywood director Steven Spielberg. Nobel Prize winner Elie Wiesel's foundation lost more than $15 million in Madoff's fraud. Quote, "We thought he was God. We trusted everything in his hands," Wiesel said in 2009. For decades, Madoff ran his scheme out of a midtown Manhattan tower known as the Lipstick Building, lying to his clients about trades he never made and returns that didn't exist, while duping new clients into handing over their wealth. The money helped Madoff and his wife Ruth enjoy luxuries such as a Manhattan penthouse, a French villa, and expensive cars and yachts, with a combined net worth of about $825 million. The scheme collapsed when the 2008 financial crisis drove his investors to try and cash out, but their money was gone. Ruth Madoff was never charged. She said she felt her husband had betrayed her after nearly a half-century of marriage. Their son Mark died by suicide in 2010 on the second anniversary of his father's arrest. Their other son Andrew died of cancer in 2014. No immediate members of his family were in court when he was sentenced to a century and a half behind bars. Madoff addressed his victims in attendance, saying, "I am sorry. I know that doesn't help you."
Terrible. Toshiba's CEO resigned today amid controversy. He had been under fire over a buyout bid from his former employer. Kira Lee reports.
Toshiba's CEO Nobuaki Kurumatani resigned on Wednesday amid controversy over a $20 billion buyout bid from CVC Capital Partners. The conglomerate's shares surged on reports that other suitors are now thought to be waiting in the wings. Previous CEO Satoshi Sunakawa will once again assume the helm. Kurumatani had come under fire over the bid from CVC, his former employer. There were also damaging allegations that management pressured investors before a shareholder meeting to support desired board nominations. CVC's offer to take the scandal-hit Japanese conglomerate private and retain incumbent management was perceived as designed to shield Kurumatani and others from pressure from activist shareholders. Sources said the offer sparked a strong backlash from Toshiba managers and some board members, prompting them to lobby against it to the government. Shares in Toshiba closed over 5% higher on Wednesday. Other potential suitors for Toshiba reportedly include private equity giant KKR & Co. and Canada's Brookfield Asset Management.
Still to come this evening. Americans are finally buying less toilet paper. How are household and cleaning products doing? And a beloved Los Angeles movie theater is closing for good. Many are calling on Hollywood celebrities to save it. Stay tuned to find out more.
Hey everyone, today's an exciting day. I'm joined by my old friend, Mr. Ellis Williams, AKA Mr. Biggs, one of the founding fathers of hip hop from the mighty Soul Sonic Force, who by the way happened to be a CarShield customer and I had no idea.
When I saw you representing CarShield, I knew CarShield was the real deal. You've always been official.
You called me and you told me, you said, man, I got CarShield and it worked. What made you get it?
You know, I was actually watching a football game at the time. CarShield commercial came on. I was like, you know what? I have this old SUV, and I know the manufacturer warranty is about to run out. I don't want to get stuck with expensive car repairs.
Right.
So I gave CarShield a call. Coverage was very affordable, and there was no long-term contract. A few months after that, transmission went on my car. I took it to my mechanic. Mechanic knew of CarShield. They called CarShield and saved my family and I $2,400.
CarShield is America's #1 auto protection company. Their administrators have paid out over $1 billion in claims and cover most vehicles from 5,000 to 150,000 miles.
When I bought my used car, I didn't expect any problems right away. But when it broke down, I'm glad I had CarShield.
CarShield saved me over $4,000 and followed through with their commitment. Thank you, CarShield.
I've been a CarShield customer for close to 7 years, had 3 vehicles covered, and they saved me close to $9,000.
With coverage through CarShield's administrators, you'll receive 24/7 roadside assistance, courtesy towing, rental reimbursement at no additional charge. Plus, with CarShield's nationwide coverage network, you can choose the mechanic or dealership of your choice no matter where you are.
If you're driving without a warranty, you have to call CarShield.
Yeah, you do. Give CarShield a call today before it's too late. Remember,
CarShield cars go farther.
Protect yourself now against expensive auto repair bills. Call CarShield for a free and instant protection plan quote. Once your car breaks down, it's too late. Call 800-545-5325. That's 800-545-5325.
It seems the panic buying of paper products has slowed, at least a little. Sales of toilet paper dropping more than 32% in the 12 weeks ending April 3rd, compared to the same period last year. This is according to market research firm Nielsen IQ. In the same period, purchases of paper towels fell more than 18%, and multi-purpose wet wipe sales also down 16% versus last year. Nielsen IQ says overall sales of household and cleaning products remain higher than they were pre-pandemic. They have come down from the early pandemic months as consumers start buying at a more normal pace instead of hoarding. This has allowed suppliers to replenish inventory to keep up with demand as well. And Dollar General says it'll hire up to 20,000 employees this spring. It's the latest company to plan a hiring spree as more parts of the economy start to reopen. But the number is lower than the more than 50,000 workers the company hired around the same time last year. That was nearly double its normal hiring rate. It brought in the new workers to support a surge in sales at the height of the lockdown, probably toilet paper. The company says it'll host hiring events starting this month for positions at stores, at distribution centers, corporate offices as well. One of Los Angeles' best-known movie theaters is closing for good. Locals say they're heartbroken and concerned for the fate of other theaters forced to close during the pandemic. Gloria Tsao reports.
Once a bustling spot for movie stars and moviegoers alike, Los Angeles' famed Cinerama Dome is shutting down for good. Pacific Theaters confirmed earlier this week it would be permanently closing the Dome's home, ArcLight Hollywood, as well as 15 other cinemas across the city. It's another major blow to the movie industry as a result of the global health crisis. As a staple of the LA film scene for over 50 years, the Dome has hosted glamorous movie premieres and red carpet events. It's also every local's go-to place to watch a movie.
I was really heartbroken. There's a lot of things that have closed in this neighborhood in the last year, but this is one that I really was hoping would come back.
It's almost a sacred place, I think, to people here, where it not only would show the blockbuster tentpoles, but it would show independent films you couldn't find anywhere else. You're really connected with other film lovers there.
Like, it's just such an iconic theater that we really love going to, and yeah, so it's heartbreaking. That's why we came down today, just to look at it and take some photos of it, just to see it.
Celebrities like Lord of the Rings star Elijah Wood and Crazy Rich Asians director John Chu have taken to social media in shock and sorrow about the Dome's closure. The Dome was declared a historic monument in 1998 and features in everything from the soap opera Melrose Place to Quentin Tarantino's blockbuster Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. Many are even calling on celebrities like Tarantino and Brad Pitt to buy the theater and save it from closure. In a statement, Pacific Theaters thanked its employees for their service, as well as the many guests and members of the film industry who have, quote, made going to the movies such a magical experience over the years.
That's the latest business updates for today. You can still catch NTD Evening News with Stephanie Cox. That's at 6:30 p.m. Eastern. For NTD Business, that's all for today. Thank you for watching. We'll see you tomorrow.
We have a new channel. Subscribe to us on YouTube at NTD News. Get the highlights of our news broadcast and the most important headlines that we curate especially for you.
Don't miss out on important news. Our videos are being deleted. So if you don't want to be cut off from honest news, take a moment to sign up for our newsletter at newsletter.ntd.com so you don't lose access to NTD. Go to newsletter.ntd.com to sign up for our evening newsletter.